My husband left our child and I while there was an intruder in our house. Let me back up because nobody believes this story when I tell it, but every word is true. We'd been married for 8 years. Good years, or so I thought. Kent worked in corporate finance and traveled often for conferences. Our daughter Violet was 5, obsessed with dinosaurs, and the center of my entire universe. It was a Thursday night in November. Kent had come home early from what was supposed to be a 3-day trip to Atlanta. He walked in around 9:00 p.m., kissed Violet goodnight while she was already asleep, then told me he needed to grab something from his car. 20 minutes passed. I figured he was taking a work call, something he did constantly. Then I heard glass shatter downstairs. My blood went cold. I crept to the hallway and peered down the staircase. A man in dark clothes was climbing through our kitchen window, his silhouette visible against the streetlight outside. I ran back to our bedroom, hands shaking so badly I could barely dial Kent's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I texted him 911 over and over. Nothing. I could hear footsteps now, moving through the first floor. Heavy boots on our hardwood. I locked our bedroom door as quietly as possible. Then Violet's. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure the intruder could hear it. I called the police, whispering our address while crawling into Violet's room. She stirred but didn't wake. I held my phone in one hand and a pair of scissors from her craft box in the other, the most pathetic weapon imaginable. The footsteps came up the stairs. Slowly, methodically, like he knew exactly where he was going. I heard him try the guest room door, then the bathroom. I pressed myself against Violet's closet, pulling her into my lap, covering her mouth gently so she wouldn't make a sound if she woke. The doorknob to her room rattled, once, twice, then silence. The police arrived 8 minutes later, though it felt like 8 hours. They found the intruder downstairs, calmly eating food from our refrigerator. He didn't run, didn't fight, just smiled at them like they'd interrupted his dinner. When they arrested him, he kept staring up at Violet's bedroom window. Kent showed up 30 minutes after the police. His car was still in the driveway where he'd supposedly been all along. I fell asleep, he said, his face pale. I'm so sorry. I had my phone on silent. But here's the thing that made my stomach drop. When the police questioned the intruder, he mentioned my husband's name, said someone had told him when would be a good time to come by. The detective pulled me aside and showed me text messages on the intruder's phone, detailed descriptions of our house layout, our schedules, Violet's bedroom location. Kent swore he didn't know the man, claimed his phone must have been hacked. The investigation went nowhere because they couldn't prove intent, only trespassing. But I started going through Kent's things after that night. I found a second phone hidden in his office desk. Messages to a woman named Brooke about leaving me, about life insurance policies, about making things look like a tragedy, about how much easier everything would be if I was just gone. The intruder was released on bail 3 weeks later. Kent filed for divorce the same day, claiming I'd become paranoid and unstable after the break-in. He told our friends and family I was seeing threats everywhere, that I needed psychiatric help. He fought for full custody of Violet, painting me as an unfit mother who couldn't keep our daughter safe, who had, in fact, been the reason our home was targeted in the first place, due to my reckless social media posts that broadcast our location and routines. Now I'm sitting in my lawyer's office with a flash drive containing everything I found on that second phone. My lawyer just looked up at me with an expression I can't quite read. There's something else on here, she said slowly. Something you need to see. She turned her laptop screen toward me. The video file was dated 3 months before the break-in. Kent was sitting in what looked like a hotel room, talking to someone off camera. The audio was muffled at first, but my lawyer had already enhanced it. I could hear every word clearly. We need to make it look natural, Kent was saying. An accident or a break-in gone wrong. The life insurance pays double for accidental death. He paused, listening to whoever was speaking. No, she trusts me completely. She has no idea about any of this. Another pause. Brooke's already lined up to move in once everything settles. We just need to wait for the right opportunity. My hands went numb. I'd suspected the affair, even suspected he wanted me gone, but hearing him discuss my death so casually made bile rise in my throat. My lawyer reached across her desk and squeezed my hand. There's more, she said quietly. The person he's talking to? We ran a voice analysis. It matches the intruder who broke into your house. His name was Curtis Vance. He had a criminal record spanning 15 years, mostly theft and assault charges. But here's what made everything click into place. Curtis and Kent had gone to college together. They'd been roommates freshman year before Curtis dropped out. My lawyer had found their old university records, photos from a fraternity party where they were standing side by side. Kent had lied to the police about not knowing Curtis. He'd orchestrated the entire break-in, probably planning for Curtis to do more than just eat our food and stare at windows. Something had gone wrong that night. Maybe Curtis lost his nerve. Maybe Kent's timing was off. But the plan had been real, and I had proof. The divorce hearing was scheduled for the following week. Kent's lawyer was confident, probably because Kent had been feeding him a narrative about my mental instability. They had no idea what I was walking in with. I spent those days making copies of everything, storing files in multiple locations, sending documentation to people I trusted. I wasn't taking any chances. The night before the hearing, Kent called me. His voice was smooth, concerned even. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, he said. Maybe we're moving too fast with this divorce. Maybe we should try counseling first, for Violet's sake. I almost laughed. He could sense something had shifted. Maybe his lawyer had warned him that I seemed too calm, too prepared. Or maybe Curtis had reached out from jail, spooked by something. Either way, Kent was trying to backpedal. I think it's too late for counseling, I said evenly. I'll see you in court tomorrow. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Wood-paneled walls, harsh fluorescent lighting, a judge who looked like she'd heard every sob story imaginable and believed none of them. Kent sat with his lawyer looking polished and professional. He'd worn his best suit, the navy one that made him look trustworthy. His lawyer went first, painting a picture of a devoted father concerned about his daughter's safety. He talked about my paranoia, my accusations, my inability to move past the trauma of the break-in. He implied I'd become fixated on conspiracy theories, that I was creating danger where none existed. He presented screenshots of my text to Kent, dozens of messages asking where he was, who he was with, what he was doing. Out of context, they looked obsessive. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood slowly, deliberately. She didn't address Kent's accusations at all. Instead, she played the video. The entire courtroom watched Kent discuss my murder like he was ordering takeout. The judge's expression never changed, but I saw her hand tighten around her pen. My lawyer presented the phone records next. Hundreds of calls between Kent and Curtis in the months leading up to the break-in. Then the text messages, the house layout Curtis had referenced during his arrest, the life insurance policy Kent had increased without telling me. Policy value was $800,000. He'd upped it from $200,000 just 6 weeks before Curtis showed up in our kitchen. Kent's face had gone from confident to gray. His lawyer was frantically whispering, shuffling papers, trying to regroup. But there was no recovering from this. The judge asked Kent directly if he had anything to say. He opened his mouth, closed it, then shook his head. The custody decision was immediate. Sole custody to me, with supervised visitation for Kent pending a criminal investigation. The judge made it clear she was forwarding everything to the district attorney's office. Kent was escorted out by courthouse security before he could approach me. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. This was the man I'd built a life with, who'd held my hand during Violet's birth, who'd promised to protect us. And he'd tried to have me killed for insurance money and a new girlfriend. Brooke reached out 2 days later. She wanted to meet, claimed she had no idea about Kent's plan. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, more out of morbid curiosity than anything else. She showed up in designer clothes, her hair perfect, looking nothing like someone whose boyfriend was about to be charged with conspiracy to commit murder. I didn't know, she said immediately, her voice shaking. He told me you two were already separated, that you were making the divorce difficult. I swear I never would have gotten involved if I'd known the truth. I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. She seemed genuinely upset, but then again, so had Kent every time he'd lied to me. Did you know about the life insurance? I asked. She blinked. What life insurance? The $800,000 policy on my life. The one Kent was planning to collect after I died in a tragic home invasion. Her face went white. She grabbed her coffee cup, her hands trembling so badly liquid sloshed onto the table. No, I didn't know anything about that. He told me he was getting a good settlement from the divorce, that we'd use that money to start over. Part of me wanted to believe her. The other part remembered that she'd been sleeping with a married man, helping him plan a future while his wife was still very much alive and in the picture. Whether she knew the specifics or not, she'd been complicit in destroying my family. You need to talk to the police, I said. Tell them everything Kent told you, every conversation you had about me, about the divorce, about his plans. If you really didn't know, then prove it. She nodded quickly, desperately. I will. I promise. Then she paused, looking at me with something like pity. How did you not see who he really was? The question hung in the air. How had I not seen it? 8 years of marriage and I'd missed every warning sign. Or maybe I'd seen them and chosen to explain them away. The late nights he blamed on work, the way he'd sometimes look at me like I was an obstacle instead of a partner, the gradual distance that I'd attributed to stress. I saw who I wanted to see, I said finally. That's what we do, isn't it? We see the best in the people we love until we can't anymore. The criminal investigation moved faster than I expected. Curtis cut a deal in exchange for his testimony. He admitted Kent had hired him, paid him $5,000 up front with another $15,000 promised after the job was done. The plan had been simple. Curtis would break in during one of Kent's trips, make it look like a robbery gone wrong. I'd be killed, Kent would have an alibi, and no one would question the grieving husband. But Curtis had gotten cold feet at the last moment. He'd seen Violet's dinosaur nightlight through the window, heard me on the phone with the police, and realized he couldn't go through with it. He'd stayed in the house eating food because he didn't know what else to do, his brain frozen with panic. When the police arrived, he was almost relieved. Kent was arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. His bail was set at $500,000. His parents posted it within 24 hours. Apparently, they believed this was all a misunderstanding, that their son could never do something so horrible. They'd always been cold to me, treating me like I wasn't quite good enough for their son. Now they were united in thinking I'd somehow orchestrated this entire thing to destroy Kent's life. The trial date was set for 4 months out. In the meantime, I had to rebuild everything. My job at the marketing firm had been understanding during the initial crisis, but I'd missed so much work that they'd had to let me go. I couldn't blame them. I filed for unemployment while searching for new positions, but my name was all over the news. Woman's husband tried to have her killed. Every interview I went to, I could see the questions in their eyes. Was I difficult? Had I driven him to it? Would I bring drama into their workplace? I finally found work at a small nonprofit that helped domestic violence survivors. The director, a woman named Felicity, had been through her own nightmare with an abusive ex. She didn't ask me about the case. She just offered me a position coordinating their emergency housing program. The pay was half what I'd made before, but it was honest work that mattered. Violet started therapy. She was too young to understand the full scope of what had happened, but she knew her daddy wasn't allowed to see her anymore, unless a supervisor was present. She knew we'd had to move to a smaller apartment. That money was tight. That mommy cried sometimes when she thought Violet was asleep. The therapist said she was showing signs of anxiety, nightmares about bad men in windows. My 5-year-old daughter was dealing with trauma that would take years to process. Kent's supervised visits were a special kind of torture. I had to drop Violet off at a facility where a social worker watched their every interaction. Kent would show up with gifts, trying to buy back her affection. Violet would come home confused, asking why Daddy couldn't come to our house anymore, why we didn't live together. How do you explain to a kindergartner that her father tried to have her mother murdered? The therapy bills piled up alongside legal fees. My lawyer had been worth every penny, but criminal cases are expensive even for the victim. I had to sell my car and rely on public transportation. We ate a lot of pasta and rice. I stopped buying coffee out, started cutting my own hair, learned to make Violet's clothes last longer by patching holes and letting out hems. My parents wanted to help, but they were retired on a fixed income. They'd already given me everything they could afford. My dad kept saying he wished he could do more, that he felt helpless watching his daughter struggle. My mom took Violet on weekends to give me a break, driving 3 hours each way to pick her up. Then the trial started. The courthouse became my second home. I sat through jury selection, watching Kent's lawyer try to find people who might sympathize with a man accused of plotting his wife's murder. They settled on 8 men and 4 women, a mix of ages and backgrounds. The alternates included a retired teacher who reminded me of my mom. The prosecution presented their case methodically. They played the video of Kent discussing my death. They brought in Curtis to testify about the plan. They showed the life insurance documents, the phone records, the text messages. They brought in the detective who'd investigated the break-in and later connected it to Kent. Every piece of evidence built on the last until the picture was undeniable. Kent's defense tried to argue entrapment, claimed Curtis had manipulated Kent, suggested the video was taken out of context. But there was no context that made planning your wife's murder acceptable. The jury looked skeptical from day 1. By day 3, they looked disgusted. I had to testify on day 5. Kent's lawyer cross-examined me for 3 hours, trying to make me seem unreasonable, paranoid, vengeful. He brought up my job loss, suggested I was financially motivated to see Kent convicted. He questioned my mental state after the break-in, implied I'd fabricated evidence during a breakdown. I answered every question as calmly as I could, though inside I was screaming. The prosecutor let me clarify on redirect. She asked about our marriage, about Kent's behavior in the months before the break-in. I told the truth. He'd been distant but not cruel, distracted but not obviously planning murder. I'd thought we were going through a rough patch, not that he was literally trying to end my life. Brooke testified next. She admitted the affair, admitted Kent had told her I was difficult and that the divorce would be contentious. But she maintained she'd known nothing about the murder plot. The jury didn't seem to believe her. In their eyes, she was the other woman who'd helped destroy a family. The defense called Kent to the stand on day 8. It was a risk, but they probably figured they had nothing to lose. Kent tried to seem remorseful, claimed he'd been depressed and said things he didn't mean. He swore he never actually intended to hurt me, that Curtis had misunderstood their conversations. But the video was too clear. The timeline was too detailed. He'd planned this carefully, methodically. The jury could see through every lie. Closing arguments happened on day 9. The prosecution summarized the evidence efficiently. A man who wanted a new life without the inconvenience of divorce costs or custody battles. A man who thought he could collect insurance money and start over with his girlfriend. A man who hired his old college roommate to commit murder. The defense grasped at reasonable doubt, but there wasn't any to be found. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I spent that time in a witness room, staring at beige walls and drinking terrible coffee. My lawyer kept checking her phone, waiting for the call. When it finally came, we rushed back to the courtroom, guilty on all counts. Kent's face crumbled. His parents gasped behind me. I felt nothing, just empty relief that it was over. The judge scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks out and remanded Kent to custody. No more bail. He was led away in handcuffs without looking at me. Sentencing day brought its own drama. Kent's parents begged the judge for leniency, painted him as a good man who'd made a mistake. A mistake. As if plotting murder was like forgetting to pay a parking ticket. My victim impact statement was brief. I talked about Violet's nightmares, about the financial ruin, about the trust that had been shattered. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just stated facts. The judge sentenced Kent to 18 years with possibility of parole after 12. It felt simultaneously like too much and not nearly enough. 18 years meant Violet would be grown before her father got out. But it also meant he'd eventually walk free while I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Life after the trial was strange. People expected me to be relieved, to move on, to find closure. But trauma doesn't work like that. I still checked locks 3 times before bed. I still tensed when I heard footsteps behind me. I still had nightmares about Curtis climbing through our window, except in the dreams he didn't stop in the kitchen. Work at the nonprofit became a lifeline. I was helping women escape situations similar to mine, connecting them with resources, finding them safe housing. Felicity promoted me to assistant director after 6 months. The pay increase was modest but meaningful. We could afford fresh vegetables again. I bought Violet new shoes that actually fit. Violet's therapy was helping. Her nightmares decreased from nightly to occasional. She stopped asking about her dad after a few months. Kids are resilient in ways that break your heart. She shouldn't have had to be this strong at 6 years old. I started dating again 2 years after the trial. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and movies with men from dating apps who seemed relatively normal. It was harder than I expected. I'd catch myself analyzing everything they said, looking for red flags, wondering what secrets they were hiding. Trust didn't come easy anymore. Then I met Graham at a community event the nonprofit was hosting. He ran a construction company that built affordable housing. We started talking about building codes and zoning laws, the most boring conversation that somehow led to dinner the following week. He was divorced with a teenage son. He'd been through his own nightmare with a custody battle. We understood each other's scars. 6 months in, I told him everything. About Kent, about the break-in, about the trial. I expected him to run. Instead, he said, "I'm glad you're still here." That was it. No dramatic declarations, no pity, just genuine gratitude that I'd survived. We got married 3 years after Kent's sentencing. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Violet was my flower girl, wearing a purple dress she'd picked out herself. She called Graham by his first name, not Dad. That title was too complicated, too loaded. But she trusted him. She laughed around him. That was enough. Kent sent a letter from prison congratulating me on my marriage. The audacity was breathtaking. He wrote about how he'd found faith, how he'd spent years reflecting on his mistakes. He wanted to rebuild a relationship with Violet. He thought maybe supervised visits could resume now that he'd had time to work on himself. I threw the letter away. Then I retrieved it, made copies, and sent it to my lawyer, just in case. You don't survive attempted murder by assuming your attacker has genuinely changed. Violet turned 8, 9, 10. She excelled in school, made friends easily, joined the soccer team. She rarely mentioned Kent anymore. When she did, it was matter of fact. My biological father is in prison. She'd say it the same way other kids mentioned their parents being divorced or living in different states. It was simply a fact of her life. The nightmares came less frequently for me too, maybe once a month instead of every week. Therapy helped. So did Graham's steady presence. So did time. People say time heals all wounds. That's not quite accurate. Time makes wounds scar over. The scar tissue remains, a permanent reminder of what happened, but it stops hurting with every breath. I got a call from the parole board when Kent hit his 12-year mark. They wanted to know if I planned to attend the hearing, if I wanted to make a statement. I thought about it for days. Part of me wanted to show up, to remind them what he'd done. The other part wanted nothing to do with him ever again. Graham left the decision to me. "Whatever you need," he said. "I'll support you either way." I chose to write a statement instead of appearing in person. I detailed the lasting impact on Violet, on me, on our ability to trust. I explained why I believed Kent remained a danger. The parole board denied his request. He'd be eligible again in 2 years. Violet was 13 when she asked to see the court transcripts. She'd grown up knowing the basics, but she wanted details. I couldn't protect her from the truth forever. Graham and I sat with her while she read through the sanitized version my lawyer had prepared. Violet cried. Then she got angry. Then she asked why her father had hated me so much. He didn't hate me, I told her. He just loved money and his girlfriend more than he loved being a decent person. Some people make choices that destroy everything around them. That doesn't mean you're responsible for his choices. She processed it the way teenagers do, swinging between rage and grief. Her therapist helped her navigate the complicated emotions of hating what her father did while still mourning the dad she'd imagined he could have been. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. I got promoted again at work. Director of operations. The nonprofit had grown significantly, helping hundreds of women each year. Felicity was talking about retirement, grooming me to take over as executive director. It felt surreal. 6 years ago, I'd been unemployable, broke, terrified. Now I was building a career helping others survive what I'd survived. Kent's second parole hearing happened when Violet was 15. This time I attended in person. I wanted him to see what he'd done, who he'd hurt. I wanted him to see that we'd survived despite his best efforts to destroy us. The hearing room was small, institutional. Kent looked older, grayer. Prison had aged him. He made his case. Talked about rehabilitation programs, about therapy, about remorse. He cried when talking about missing Violet's childhood. He apologized directly to me for the first time. The words felt rehearsed, calculated. Maybe I was too cynical. Or maybe I just knew him too well. I gave my statement. Talked about Violet's anxiety, about the years of therapy, about the financial devastation that we were still recovering from. Talked about trust and safety and the permanent damage his actions had caused. The board deliberated for 20 minutes before denying parole again. 2 more years. Violet was relieved. She'd been having anxiety attacks for weeks leading up to the hearing, terrified he'd be released. She'd convinced herself he'd come after us again, that history would repeat itself. Graham took her to therapy twice a week to work through the panic. Eventually, it subsided, but the fear lingered, always just beneath the surface. I turned 40 the year of Kent's 3rd parole hearing. We threw a party at our house, the one Graham and I had bought together. It had a security system, reinforced locks, cameras on every entrance. I still checked them obsessively, but less than before. Violet was 17 now, applying to colleges, talking about studying psychology to help other kids who'd been through trauma. Kent was granted parole on his third attempt. He'd served 14 years total. The board determined he'd been sufficiently rehabilitated. I received the notification via certified letter. He'd be released in 30 days with standard parole conditions. No contact with me or Violet without court approval. Regular check-ins with his parole officer. Employment requirements. The news sent Violet into a spiral. She'd built her life around the safety of his imprisonment. Now that foundation was crumbling. We increased her therapy sessions. Graham had extra security cameras installed. I contacted my lawyer to discuss our options if Kent violated the no-contact order. He was released on a Tuesday morning in March. I know because his parents posted about it on social media, celebrating their son's freedom. Photos of Kent looking thin and tired, standing outside the prison gates. Comments from people who believed in second chances, who thought 14 years was punishment enough. No one mentioned his victim. No one mentioned the daughter he'd traumatized. 3 months passed. No contact. Then 6 months. Violet started her freshman year of college 6 hours away. She called every night the first week, anxious about being so far from home. Gradually, the calls became less frequent as she found her footing. She joined a support group for children of incarcerated parents. She was healing in her own way. Kent reached out through his lawyer 1 year after his release. He wanted to meet Violet, rebuild their relationship. The lawyer emphasized Kent's growth, his accountability, his desire to make amends. My lawyer responded that Violet was an adult now and could make her own decisions. We forwarded the request to her. She called me crying. "I don't know what to do," she said. "Part of me wants to hear what he has to say. Part of me never wants to see him again." I told her both feelings were valid. That whatever she decided, Graham and I would support her. That she didn't owe Kent anything, but if she wanted closure, we'd help her get it safely. She decided to meet him. Once. In a public place with her therapist present. No promises beyond that single meeting. The therapist would mediate, could end the session at any time if Violet became uncomfortable. I spent the day of the meeting pacing our living room, phone in hand, waiting for her call. It lasted 45 minutes. Kent apologized. Violet listened. He tried to explain his choices, though his explanations rang hollow even secondhand. He wanted to be part of her life moving forward. She told him she needed time to process. They didn't schedule another meeting. Violet called me from her car afterward. She sounded drained. "I don't think I can have a relationship with him," she said. "Maybe someday. But right now, it's too much. He took too much from us." I told her I was proud of her for trying, and prouder still that she knew her own limits. Kent tried reaching out twice more over the following year. Brief emails asking how she was, what she was studying, if she'd consider another meeting. Violet responded once with a brief update, then stopped replying. Eventually, the emails stopped coming. Life found a new normal. Violet thrived at college. Graham's business expanded. I became executive director when Felicity retired. We helped more women each year, grew our programs, opened a second shelter location. The work was exhausting and meaningful in equal measure. I still had bad days. Anniversaries were hard. The date of the break-in, the date of Kent's arrest, the date of the verdict. Each year they got slightly easier, the memories less sharp. Therapy helped. So did focusing on the future, rather than dwelling in the past. Violet graduated college with honors. She was accepted into a graduate program for clinical psychology. She wanted to specialize in childhood trauma. She'd taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. I'd never been prouder. Kent showed up at her graduation. No one had invited him. He simply appeared in the crowd, watching from a distance. Security escorted him out after I alerted them to the restraining order that technically only applied to me, but could be extended given the circumstances. Violet didn't even know he'd been there until afterward. Part of me was grateful. She deserved that day without his shadow over it. The police issued Kent a warning. He'd technically violated his parole conditions by attending without permission. His parole officer put him on stricter supervision. 6 months later, he moved to another state. His parents let it slip during an awkward encounter at a grocery store. He'd found work in Arizona, wanted a fresh start. I felt relief more than anything. Distance meant safety. Years continued passing. Violet got engaged to a kind man she'd met in grad school. Someone steady and honest who knew her history and loved her anyway. Their wedding was everything hers deserved to be. Joyful. Safe. Full of people who genuinely cared. Kent wasn't invited. He didn't try to come. Maybe he'd finally learned boundaries. Or maybe he'd simply moved on with his own life. Either way, his absence was a gift. I walked Violet down the aisle alongside Graham. Both of us had earned that honor. She'd grown up with 2 parents who'd protected her, loved her, shown her what healthy relationships looked like. Kent had given her DNA. We'd given her everything else. At the reception, Violet gave a speech thanking us for showing her what real love looked like, for teaching her that family isn't always about biology, that sometimes the people who save you become your truest kin. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later that night, Graham and I sat in our backyard under the stars. "How did we get here?" I asked him. "From that nightmare to this?" He squeezed my hand. "One day at a time. Same way everyone gets through the hard things. You just keep going until one day you look back and realize you've built something beautiful from the wreckage." I thought about that. About the woman I'd been the night Curtis broke in. Terrified. Trapped. Married to a man who wanted her dead. That woman felt like a stranger now. I'd become someone stronger. Not because I'd wanted to. Not because I'd chosen this path, but because survival had demanded it. Kent died 3 years after Violet's wedding. Heart attack. His parents called to let us know, perhaps thinking we'd want to attend the funeral. We didn't. Violet sent flowers because she'd always been kinder than circumstances required. But we didn't go. There was nothing left to say. His death didn't bring closure the way people expected. Closure isn't something you get from someone else. It's something you build yourself, piece by piece, day by day. We'd built ours long before he died. His passing just confirmed what we already knew. He couldn't hurt us anymore. He never really could after that trial. We'd taken our power back. Violet had her first child the following spring, a daughter with Graham's eyes and Violet's stubborn chin. They named her Hope. It felt appropriate. She represented everything good that had come from the ashes of what Kent had tried to destroy. A whole new generation untouched by his violence. I held my granddaughter and marveled at how life continues, how love persists even after betrayal tries to extinguish it, how families can be chosen and built and protected with more strength than blood alone provides. The nonprofit I ran continued growing. We helped thousands of women each year, women whose husbands had tried to kill them, women whose partners had drained their bank accounts, women whose families had sold them to the highest bidder. Each story was different. Each story was the same. Someone had tried to destroy them. They'd refused to stay destroyed. I understood them in ways I couldn't have before Kent, before Curtis, before that November night when everything shattered. My trauma became my qualification. My survival became my credential. I could look these women in the eye and say, I know how this feels, and I know you can survive it. On quiet days, I sometimes thought about alternate timelines. What if Curtis had gone through with the plan? What if the police had arrived 5 minutes later? What if I hadn't found that second phone? My entire life balanced on a series of small moments that could have gone differently, but they didn't. I survived. Violet survived. We built lives worth living. That was its own kind of victory. Graham retired at 62. We traveled places we'd always wanted to see. Italy, Japan, New Zealand, places where no one knew our story, where we were just tourists admiring scenery. It felt freeing to be anonymous, to have our tragedy not define us. Violet finished her doctorate, Dr. Violet Hayes. She opened a practice specializing in family trauma. Her waiting list was 6 months long. She was brilliant at her work because she understood from the inside out what her patients were experiencing. Hope grew into a bright, curious toddler, untouched by the darkness that had shaped her mother's childhood. That was our greatest achievement, breaking the cycle, ensuring the next generation knew only safety and love. I turned 50, half a century of life. More than half of it had been good. The bad years, the Kent years, they'd shaped me, but they hadn't broken me. That distinction mattered. The nonprofit board threw me a retirement party when I finally stepped down at 55. I'd given them 15 years, helped build something that would outlast me. The new director was a survivor herself. The organization was in good hands. Retirement suited me. I volunteered at the shelter sometimes, but mostly I focused on being present. For Graham, for Violet, for Hope. The simple pleasure of not having to solve everyone's crisis became its own kind of peace. On the anniversary of the break-in, I lit a candle. Not for Kent, not for what was lost, but for the woman I'd become afterward. The one who'd refused to be a victim beyond that first night, who'd fought back in courtrooms and therapy sessions and quiet moments of choosing to keep living. Some stories don't have happy endings. They have surviving endings, continuing endings. We made it through endings. This was mine. Not perfect, not painless, but ours, built from the wreckage with our own hands. Violet called that evening. Just wanted to hear your voice, she said. To tell you I love you. To thank you again for everything. I love you too, I told her. And I'd do it all again, because that was the truth. Despite the terror and trauma and years of recovery, despite the nightmares and anxiety and permanent scars, I'd do it all again to get to this moment, to have my daughter happy and safe, to have built a life that mattered. Kent had tried to write my ending. Instead, I'd written my own, and it was better than anything he could have imagined. That was the real victory. Not his imprisonment or death, but my refusal to let his worst moment define all my moments after. The candle burned down slowly. Outside, children played in the neighborhood. Graham was making dinner. Hope's laughter carried from Violet's house next door where they'd stopped by. Life continuing, life persisting, life winning. I blew out the candle. The smoke curled upward and disappeared. Some things need to be remembered. Others need to be released. I'd learned the difference. Finally, after all these years, I'd learned when to hold on and when to let go. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. But I'd face them the way I'd faced everything since that November night. With determination. With love. With the knowledge that I was stronger than anything trying to break me. That knowledge was worth more than any revenge. Worth more than Kent's suffering or death. I didn't need him to hurt the way he'd hurt me. I just needed to keep building the life he'd tried to take. Every good day was proof he'd failed. Every smile from Violet was evidence that love won. Every peaceful night of sleep was its own quiet triumph. The story people wanted was simple. Villain tries to kill heroine. Villain gets caught. Villain goes to prison. Heroine lives happily ever after. But real life was messier. The wounds took years to heal. The fear never fully disappeared. Happiness had to be fought for daily. Still, we fought. And we won. Not because we were special or chosen, but because we refused to surrender. That refusal, that daily choice to keep going, that was the real story. Not the night Kent tried to have me killed. but every night after, when I chose to stay alive.